Hello YouTube, this is TechGuy1337 with the PC Geek channel. Today we're going to go over upgrading your laptop. We're going to mostly talk about hardware upgrades, a little bit of software too, but that's going to be later on. Today we're going to focus on upgrading the RAM in your computer. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. It's the memory inside your system that your operating system and your programs run off of. So generally upgrading that can lend a significant speed increase. First thing to keep in mind though is that even if your, say, computer system will support 4 gigs of RAM, your operating system might not. Most Windows 32-bit operating systems will only support 2.4 gigs of RAM. That means even if you install 4 gigs of RAM on a computer using a 32-bit Windows XP, for instance, you wouldn't be able to utilize all of it. It wouldn't increase your performance as much as it would on a 64-bit system. So that said, really quickly we're going to touch on possible other operating systems. Now I understand there's a lot of Windows users out there. I use it on both my desktop and my laptop, but I also use a operating system called Linux. It's free. It can do many things that Windows can't. One nice thing about Linux is that it generally runs a lot lighter than Windows does. For anybody interested, if you're a beginner, if you have not messed with Linux before, I would recommend that you download a version of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is what I would recommend to anybody who's not familiar with Linux because of its easy to use interface and it's just really user friendly, so that's what I would recommend. Alright, now we're going to actually talk about the RAM upgrade. Before we get started, there's a couple things you need to do. Before you buy or purchase any new RAM for your system, you need to figure out exactly what it takes, its frequency, form factor, everything like that. And I'll explain that in a second. If you have an HP, just Google HP manufacturer website and it should take you right there. There'll be a little system that they have for finding out what specifications your laptop has, and that'll tell you how much RAM your system can support, what frequency, what form factor, etc., etc., etc. Generally, there is two very popular form factors for laptop memory, and that is SoDIMM, spelled S-O-D-I-M-M, and then MicroDIMM. MicroDIMM is has a higher form factor than SoDIMM. And as such, most laptop manufacturers will use SoDIMM over MicroDIMM. So after you get to the website, you need to write down the information. Is it SoDIMM? Is it MicroDIMM? You'll see a PC, say 4200. It might have different letters in there depending on your system. You'll need to write that down. You also need to write down how many pins it has. Does it have 184? Does it have 204 pins? That would be desktop memory. What does it have? So after that, we need to go find some RAM that'll fit in our system and work. I would recommend newegg.com. Go on over there, type in your specifications, order it. Okay, next up is the actual process of installing new RAM into the system. The demonstration computer that we're going to use today is the laptop I have. It's a compact Preseria V3000 3020 US. It's an older model. It was built in 2006. That's what I'm going to use to demonstrate all the upgrades and modifications that we're going to be doing on these laptops. But before we actually get to that, there's a couple things you need to have on hand. You need to have on hand latex gloves preferably. You need a clean workspace and a dry environment. Having drinks or food around a computer that you're working on is generally a bad idea. One thing we're going to talk about real quick is commonly known as ESD, and that stands for electrostatic discharge. It's static electricity. It generally builds up on objects or on you and your clothing, and if you are touching the sensitive internals of a computer, you can easily discharge the electricity into the computer and fry some components, so we don't want to do that. So I would generally advise not operating on your computer by putting it on your bed or anything like that. A desk that's cleaned off and spacious should work. Alright, so let's get to it. So we're here at the laptop, and the first thing we need to do before we get started is to put on our latex gloves. Now, I just found that I am completely out of latex gloves, so if you don't have any either, that's fine. It's generally recommended to wear them when you're going to be working on a laptop because it reduces the chances of ESD damage, and the dirt and the oil on your fingers can also interfere with laptop internals. So, if you do not have latex gloves, I would at least recommend that you go wash your hands and dry them very thoroughly before beginning work on your laptop. Now the first thing to do whenever you're working on any kind of system is to interrupt the power supply. That means to cut the juice. If it's a desktop, you need to shut it down and then remove the power cord. In this instance, we've obviously removed the power cord, but the battery's still installed. So we're going to take that out real quick, and on most laptops there will be a switch or a button that pushes out, and that's pretty simple. Okay, the next thing we're going to need is a screwdriver. It's got to be a Phillips. Laptops have very small screws, so we have to have a screwdriver that'll fit those screws without stripping them out or damaging the laptop. On this model, there's only one thing we really have to do to get to the memory, and that is remove the base plate right here. So we'll do that. Alright, so now that we have the plate off, these are the DIMM modules right here. And to take them out, there are two generally metal, sometimes plastic clips on the sides of each module that you push out. Ideally. And sometimes they're small enough to where you have to use a screwdriver to push them out instead of your fingers. And the idea is just to be very careful that you do not damage these modules or anything else inside the laptop. Alright, there we go. And we're going to pull it out of here by using two fingers, one on each end of the module. Just slide it out like that. When you're installing the new memory modules, you want to be very careful that you don't touch this end right here. The reason being is that the dirt and grease on your fingers can collect on the electrodes and interfere with your system working right. So we got that one right now. And for the new one, we're going to do the same thing. It's pretty easy. It comes straight out, just like that. Alright, and on this system, because I'm not actually upgrading my laptop, this is a thing I've done before, I'm just going to put these back in. But we're going to pretend for the time being that these are the two new DIMM modules, and we're reinstalling them into the computer. So to reinstall them, it's pretty simple. We just do the opposite of what we did when we took them out. Gently, after you've set it in the slot right in here, you'll push down on the edge, and you hear it click on both ends like that. And then all we have to do is replace the cover, replace the battery, and then we're all set up. Alright, so now it's time to test whether or not the system actually sees all the RAM that we put in. And there's three ways to do this. You can go into the BIOS. If you're running Linux Ubuntu, you can log in, open the system monitor, and it will tell you. If you're running Windows, you can use the dxdiag command or Test Manager. Either or will show you. But let's go through those really quickly. We're going to go to the BIOS real quick and see what it says there. To go to the BIOS, simply turn on the computer. On models such as this one, we'll hit F10 while the system is booting to enter the BIOS. On the Compact Preserio V3000, it'll show you the amount of RAM installed in your system right down here. There's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte, so therefore it's recognizing 4 gigabytes of the RAM I put in there. Again, this is TechGuy1337 with the PC Geek channel. Thank you for watching, God bless, and have an awesome day. Subscribe!